So, I met my wife back at university. I was studying engineering, while Abigail was into law. We both came from the same city, but were living away from home. At first, we stayed in the dorms, but by our 4th year, we moved into a small apartment just 2 blocks from the campus. My parents helped us with rent. The plan was clear. Abigail and I were going to get married right after graduation. But, as you might guess, there were some hiccups, particularly with her parents. They were pretty traditional, you know, the type where before marriage, no funny business. Her folks were really strict and had raised her with old-school aristocratic values. Abigail was terrified of telling them that she had a boyfriend and that we were living together. She thought it would cause a huge blow-up, and knowing her parents, she wasn't wrong. At the time, I thought Abigail was the perfect girl, well-mannered, with strong morals, and she really valued our relationship. She wasn't the type to overstep boundaries. I, on the other hand, tried to be the guy she deserved. In fact, I even quit smoking for her. I had picked up the habit when I was 16, but I gave it up, wanting to be better for her. Before we knew it, college was behind us. We had graduated, defended our theses, and now it was time to head back home. Abigail introduced me to her parents, and after 3 months, we tied the knot. Now let me tell you a bit about her family. They were quite well off. Both her mom and dad ran their own businesses. The oldest of her 2 sisters were already married with kids and held solid positions. On the other hand, I came from a much more modest background. My dad was a welder at a local factory, and my mom had spent her whole life teaching at a kindergarten. My parents got along with Abigail just fine, but I always felt a little out of place with her folks. They looked at me with suspicion, like wolves eyeing a piece of meat. I could tell they were whispering about me, and honestly, it didn't sit well. It was uncomfortable, knowing they didn't fully trust me. But things started to shift when Abigail got pregnant, and we had our daughter. Suddenly, her parents began to trust me, and everything started looking up. I was working. Abigail was on maternity leave, and life seemed to be moving along smoothly. Or at least, that's what I thought. I had almost no friends at work. Everyone knew that I was the husband of the CEO's daughter, so they kept their distance and treated me with extreme caution. It bothered me a bit. Anyway, we were having a corporate party, and I suggested to Abigail, "How about we take Amelia to my parents for the weekend and then celebrate?" She immediately shot it down. "No, Jaden. No corporate parties, especially not with Dad's employees. They're already driving me crazy," she said. "Who are the employees?" I was confused. "No, I mean my parents," Abigail explained. "They've been strangling me with their excessive care all my life. I don't want to spend any holidays with them. I didn't even want them to be at our wedding." I tried to calm her down. "They just love you, Abigail. They do what they can for you." "No, they love themselves, their cars, their houses, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm just some kind of doll they can control however they want. They've suffocated me with their love. I didn't start living normally until I left for the university. Before that, they suffocated me with their overprotectiveness." "Let's not talk about my parents anymore," she snapped, pulling away from me to go hang the laundry on the balcony. I stood there, feeling helpless. "How about you make an exception this one time? Let's go to the party together. I promise I won't ask for anything else." She sighed, looking up at me. The girls and I decided to spend the holiday weekend at Evelyn's place with the kids. There'll be contests, animators, a swimming pool, a kids' playhouse, a whole crowd of people, all with children. "Are you going to be around for the weekend?" I was surprised. "Friday and Saturday, then on Sunday morning we'll come back. Just don't tell my parents anything. Let them think we're at home. It'll be better this way." "Why?" I asked, still puzzled. "What's wrong with telling them?" Abigail was quiet for a moment. "Because Dad will be upset. He'll wonder why we didn't go to his party, and how we could possibly trade his corporate event for a kid's party. It's better if they think we're just quietly celebrating at home. It'll avoid a whole mess. All right, if that's what you want, I said, watching her face soften. It was clear this conversation hadn't been easy for her. So Friday rolled around. I went to the corporate party, while Abigail and our daughter headed to the children's party. The restaurant was packed, noisy, and chaotic. I spent a couple of hours wandering through the halls, chatting with colleagues. Then, out of nowhere, my father-in-law showed up. "I don't see Abigail. Did you two come together?" he asked, looking around confused in the crowd. For some reason, I didn't think it through, and without thinking, I just blurted out the truth. "No, I came alone. Abigail and the little one went to some kid's party. They've got animators and contests, I think." His face froze for a moment. "Evelyn?" he repeated, as if the name didn't quite register. Then, without another word, he disappeared into the crowd. I continued to mill around, hoping to find someone else to chat with, but it wasn't long before my father-in-law popped back up. As suddenly as he had disappeared, he grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the exit. "Come on, we're going somewhere," he said, dragging me out to the private sector. I didn't even know there was a private sector. We drove through a small village and past a few houses before he ordered the driver to stop. "The girl's completely lying," he muttered, then marched up to a house. I had no choice but to follow him. A small, thin blonde woman opened the door. From inside, I could hear kids laughing. She looked shocked when she saw my father-in-law and didn't seem to know what to say. After a couple of seconds, she regained her composure. "Oh, hello, Jackson. What brings you here?" she stammered. "Where is my daughter?" He interrupted abruptly. "Evelyn. She left with Scarlett just a couple of minutes ago," the woman replied. "If you're lying to me, I'll call your father, and we'll see who gets the truth," my father-in-law shot back, his voice low and dangerous. "It's the penultimate house at the end of the street." The woman lowered her eyes. We followed him to the house he had mentioned. There was no light on inside, but someone was definitely home. My father-in-law walked over to the car, yanked Abigail out of the back seat, half-dressed, while a guy bolted out the other side of the car, scrambling to pull his pants up. My father-in-law went after the guy, but he was too quick. Meanwhile, I stood there, frozen, my mouth hanging open in shock, trying to process what was happening. We picked up Abigail and our daughter and took them back home. My wife clung to me, begging for forgiveness, but no matter how much I wanted to let go of the hurt, I couldn't bring myself to forgive her. I tried, but the betrayal was too much. 9 more months passed, and then, on New Year's Eve, I packed my things. In an instant, the whole family felt like strangers to me. The weight of what had happened crushed my soul, like a heavy stone I couldn't shake off. A month before the start of the training camp, I accidentally came across my wife's phone conversation. It was about a meeting that I shouldn't have known about, since I wasn't supposed to be in town at that time. I didn't tell her parents about it. It didn't make sense anymore. At that moment, I realized that it was over. Nothing tied me to her, nothing held me back. I moved in, filed for divorce, and said goodbye to her parents. I see my daughter on weekends, that's all. A couple of months after the divorce, I quit my job. To be honest, I just couldn't stay there anymore.